Welcome, you're watching Kaleidoscope Sri Lanka Live News Capsule. Sri Lanka heaved a sigh of relief last week when the IMF released $336 million of the EFF arrangement. But the country yet struggles to get the economy off the ground. In a recent debt update by Verite Research based on 16 countries, Sri Lanka was among 4 underperforming countries that had undergone debt restructuring. Verite Research presented the novel governance-linked bonds at the International Debt Conference recently as a win-win option that would also ensure Sri Lanka doesn't fall into the pit of restructuring again, a common pattern for countries who have underperformed previously. I invited lead economist of Verite Research, Raj Prabu Rajakulendran, to give us a quick insight on these bonds and what it will do for Sri Lanka. Why is Sri Lanka underperforming in the debt restructuring assessment?
I think the problem is on the quantum of restructuring and how much to restructure and how well and how deep. Because what we don't want is Sri Lanka 5 years down the line getting into another debt restructuring. So now that we've already had most of the pain, we might as well restructure deep and once and for all.
So, how will governance-linked bonds work in Sri Lanka's case? What is the win-win here?
In the most recent proposal that the bondholders have put, it includes a proposal or a proposed bond that was designed by Verite Research, and it's called the governance-linked bond. A normal bond gives you a fixed income, fixed coupons for a particular let's say 10 years. Governance-linked bonds slightly differs where the fixed income, the coupon rate, changes. That it doesn't mean it changes every year. It changes at a particular point of time. That is, if the government commits to a particular set of predetermined set of governance actions, that is before the bond is even issued. And at the time of contract, these conditions and actions are already agreed upon. Simply put, if the government does certain things, there is a reduction in the interest cost. If the government doesn't do it, then the interest cost remains the same. So obviously there's a clear benefit to the government because the government's interest cost is lower, and Sri Lanka currently suffers from a high interest cost problem because as of 2023, 80% of Sri Lanka's revenue goes for interest cost. This governance-linked bond proposed clearly benefits the government because there's only an upside. When governance improves, the risk also reduces, i.e. the bond value improves. The value of the bond is higher because, let's say, when we issued the bond, there was a particular risk associated with Sri Lanka. But since the government focuses on governance and improves it, the risk reduces, which increases the value of the bond, which means that the bondholders, when they're selling it, can sell it for a higher price than they initially got it for. So they win in the secondary market, which is not where the government is. The government clearly benefits because there is a reduction in the interest cost. So that's how the win-win happens.
But what was the response in France for these governance-linked bonds?
Last year, closer to April, May, we presented the idea of linking governance and improving governance at the previous debt conference. So that was called DebtCon 6. It's an international debt conference. It happens the venue keeps changing. So as we were doing it, we decided to write a research paper on it, and it got selected for DebtCon 7. That happened in May, and that's why we went to France internationally to present the research paper that explains theoretically this win-win situation. How does it arise, and how do you set these interest rates, so the coupon rate, so that there is a bit of win-win and there is the negotiating space. Frankly, because this was already brought in by bondholders, most of the practical issues have been resolved. It's almost ready, and I think it's on the table. So internationally, there was a lot of positive responses. People like the idea of a win-win because what makes this unique is, unlike other bonds, there are a lot of different type of bonds that are linked to improving, let's say, GDP. So even Sri Lanka has a GDP-linked bond. It's also being negotiated. There are also blue bonds that we've heard where it's linked to climate change, and when climate improves, there's a reduction in coupon. What all of this lacks that the GLB, the governance-linked bond, has is that win-win situation. And I think that was a novel concept, and there was a lot of positive response, and people were very interested in even implementing it internationally. And that's one advantage that the governance-linked bond has. When international bondholders bring it, there's already an international appeal for it, and it solves a lot of is it applicable internationally, because the bondholders have already agreed to it.
So are these bonds specifically for Sri Lanka, or can we now have these bonds as a tool for other countries as well?
So the whole idea of governance-linked bonds was born because what we realized is the success of Sri Lanka's debt restructuring is not completing it. It's not completing the IMF program. It's, like I said, making sure that Sri Lanka does not get into a restructuring again. Poor governance is very common in countries that do multiple restructurings. And there is an international indicator on this that's done by the World Bank. It's called the Worldwide Governance Indicators. And when you plot this out, you realize that a lot of countries below negative 0.1 have to restructure more than once. And Sri Lanka is on the cusp of that line. But what you're saying is very true, because other countries that are being restructured like Ghana, Zambia, Suriname are also below that line. So they also have poor governance, and they also theoretically are exhibiting signs of multiple restructurings. This was designed to improve governance, and if we don't address governance, we don't address the root cause of Sri Lanka's economic crisis.
Did you know that Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn? Do subscribe and follow us if you'd like to hear more from us.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.